In the harsh natural world of the African savanna, leopards and lions are born enemies. One is a lone, sophisticated hunter hiding in trees, and the other is the king of the grasslands, dominating the ground with team strength. However, here on the high branch of an ancient sycamore tree under the star-filled sky of Kruger, the strangest pair in natural history was rewriting all the rules of the wild world. A mature female leopard was tenderly licking the fur of a lion cub. This is not a fairy tale, there is no one to hear it. Night was slowly falling over the vast savanna of Kruger, and the African sky was blazing with stars. Neela, a 5-year-old female leopard, was climbing her tall sycamore tree. Her supple body curved gracefully between the branches, but her normally sharp golden eyes were now vacant, heavy with indescribable sorrow. 2 weeks prior, Neela had been a happy mother to her 3 cubs, 2 males and 1 female, who always waited for her to return to the den after each hunting trip. The welcoming calls of the leopard cubs reverberated throughout the small valley where Neela had chosen to establish a home for her family. However, nature never promises eternal peace. This year's first rain came more violently than ever before, and when Neela returned from hunting, the den was completely submerged, and her 3 cubs, who were too young to swim or climb, had no chance of surviving for many days. Neela wandered aimlessly around the disaster area, her cries of anguish echoing in the darkness, making even the normally watchful impalas shudder. It was the call of a mother who had lost everything, and her body continued to produce milk, a cruel reminder of the cubs who were no longer there. Each hour seemed to go on forever, but fate sometimes took unexpected turns that no one could predict. Imagine that not far away, another tragedy was taking place on the grassland. The Pride rock lion Pride was one of the strongest in the area, with 2 adult males, 6 females, and 7 cubs of different ages. Their territory covered a large area with plenty of food and water, but prosperity always draws those who are hungry for power. One hot afternoon, 3 strange male lions appeared at the edge of the territory. They were all large, with thick dark manes and muscles rippling beneath their golden fur. These were signs of strength and maturity. The battle lasted 2 days, ending with the death of both adult males in the Pride. But the new conquerors didn't stop there, they started hunting. In the midst of the slaughter, a female lion named Sarabe risked her life to protect her only son, Kopa, a 3-month-old lion cub with big golden eyes and soft, pale golden fur. She fought valiantly, but the numbers overpowered her, and Kopa fell under the enemy's claws and fangs. "Run, my love," was the last words Kopa heard from his mother, and he ran with all of his little strength, racing through tall grasses and narrow rock crevices until sunset, exhausted and afraid. He found a small bush near the base of a large sycamore tree and curled up inside that night, trembling. The dawn of a new day was slowly breaking when Neela started her hunt. Her body was still strong, but her mind was exhausted with grief. Her golden eyes scanned the landscape for potential prey, and then she heard a small, distinct sound. Not the sound of prey, but the cry of a young cub, and she froze. Her hunting instinct vanished, replaced by a new feeling that was a combination of curiosity and repressed maternal instinct. Kopa had to face the darkness alone for the first time in his life, without the warmth of his mother. His hungry cries echoed weakly in the night, blending with the sounds of the grassland and the cold stars. Often climbing, the cry came from a nearby bush, and Neela crouched tense, ready for any danger, but what she saw shocked her. A lion cub, maybe only 3 months old, curled up and trembling, his pale golden fur covered in dust and a few small scratches. According to all the laws of nature, Neela should kill this creature right away because lions are leopards' inherited enemies, and when he grew up, this tiny creature would become a deadly threat. However, Neela felt a sharp pain in her chest as the lion cub looked up, and those eyes looked at her with the same fear and desperation that she had looked for in the eyes of her own lost cubs. Prolactin, the mothering hormone, surged through Neela's veins, causing her body to react before her mind could intervene. The deepest instinctual action was quick as lightning, and Neela bit into the lion cub's scruff, not to kill, but to carry, using the same motion she had used hundreds of times with her own cubs. Her fangs tightened just enough to hold firmly without causing serious injury. Kopa, the lion cub, was too scared and exhausted to resist, and he could only make a feeble cry as he was lifted off the ground with a smooth and decisive motion. Neela climbed the sycamore tree, carrying her strange prey, climbing higher and higher until she reached a wide flat fork in the tree where she had made her nest. This was her safe place where the abduction had started in the first few days. Copa's relationship with Neela was a struggle between fear and need. Copa, who was still too young to survive alone, repeatedly tried to escape the high tree, but his immature legs were not made for climbing. He cried out for his mother throughout the night, but only Neela responded. She gently placed Copa down in the middle of the fork. The lion cub's trembling eyes were squeezed shut, certain that his last moment had arrived, but instead of claws and fangs, Copa felt a warm, rough tongue licking his head. When the lion cub attempted to climb down the tree, she brought him back gently, not cruelly, but with the patience of a mother teaching her child about danger, hunger, and thirst. Copa initially refused to accept milk from Neela, but by the second day his small body couldn't resist the basic survival needs, and when the first drops of milk touched his tongue, something changed. It tasted different from his mother's milk, but it was still sweet and nourishing, giving strength to his weak body. Meanwhile, Neela felt a significant change. Her body seemed to be rejuvenated by having another life to care for. Her milk, which had previously been a painful reminder of loss, now had a purpose. The most amazing thing was how Copa learned to move in the tree. Lions are not climbing species, and their legs aren't made for it. Their claws can't retract like leopards to grip the bark. However, under Neela's patient guidance, Copa developed his own technique and learned to use the strength of his jaw for balance, place his paws strategically, and most importantly, overcome his fear of heights. Neela hunted and brought food back for Copa day after day, first chewing the meat thoroughly before feeding him. During the second month of his new life, Copa was able to climb up and down the lower branches by himself. His shoulder and foreleg muscles developed differently from normal lions, becoming thicker and more shaped for climbing than for running across the grassland. This is a unique phenomenon, and a biologist might have commented that we are witnessing nature's extraordinary adaptability, where environment and education can overcome even genetic barriers. However, the most remarkable thing was the emotional bond between the leopard and lion cub. Every night, they slept curled together on the safe tree fork, and Copa sought warmth from Neela's spotted fur. Neela groomed him just as she had done with her own cubs, and Copa's nightly lullaby, and occasionally on moonlit nights, Copa would gaze toward the far horizon where the roars of lion prides could be heard. Something in those sounds stirred deep within his instincts, but then Neela would approach and touch his neck with her nose. The sycamore tree, with all of its branches and leaves, had become his world, and Neela was the only family he had left. The dry season gradually gave way to the rainy season, and Copa grew quickly. By the time he was 6 months old, he was no longer the helpless little lion cub. Instead, he was a strong adolescent, and the first signs of a man began to grow around his neck. His body became longer, his shoulders broader, and the unavoidable fact was that Copa would soon surpass Neela in size. In this instance, the transition from childhood to adulthood signifies the separation of mother and child. Copa's instincts would gradually awaken as he realized that he was living with a potentially dangerous species. However, Neela and Copa once again changed the rules of nature so that instead of growing apart, their bond seemed to deepen. Copa started hunting with Neela, but not in the lion's manner, hunting in packs and chasing prey. Instead, he learned the leopard's tactics, patiently ambush waiting for the ideal moment and attacking with pinpoint accuracy. The appearance of this odd hunting pair was a new nightmare for the impalas and zebras. How could they handle a lion that could suddenly jump down from a tree or... One afternoon, while they were enjoying a freshly killed impala, a new threat materialized. A large male leopard, possibly drawn by the scent of the meat, approached silently. Male leopards frequently kill cubs that are not theirs, especially when those cubs are with their mothers vying for food and territory. The intruder growled as he approached, staring directly at Neela with menacing eyes. He was bigger than her, stronger than her, and obviously prepared to fight. Copa's protective instincts caused her fur to rise along her spine. What happened next exceeded all expectations. Copa, having learned protection from Neela, didn't back away like a typical cub. Instead, he leaped forward and stood next to his adoptive mother, and from his throat came the high-pitched hiss of a leopard rather than the roar of a lion, the sound he had heard Neela make when threatening enemies. The scene was so bizarre that the male leopard stopped, perplexed. In front of him was a female leopard, and more significantly, this hybrid showed no fear. After a tense moment, the male leopard decided that this confrontation wasn't worth the risk, and he backed away, disappearing into the bushes, leaving Neela and Copa with their prey. That night, when they returned to the sycamore tree, their relationship had changed once more. Neela was no longer just the protective mother, and Copa was no longer the dependent cub. Licked the small wound Copa had scraped during the confrontation, and Copa responded with a soft growl, a sound that was neither lion-like nor leopard-like, but rather their own private language, when the rainy season ended and the dry season returned. Copa, who was now almost a year old, had clearly matured. His mane had grown thick around his head, and his roar had become deeper and more resonant. It was evident that the lion's instincts were gradually awakening, and on full moon nights, Copa would frequently descend from the sycamore tree and stand quietly on a rock overlooking the far horizon, where the roars of male lions could occasionally be heard. Something deep inside Copa responded to that call, wanting to run across the vast grasslands to feel the power in his legs to live as his species had evolved to live. Neela watched these changes with silent attention. She didn't try to stop Copa when he became enthralled with the distant sounds. Instead, she stayed close by, being a patient and unimposing presence. Perhaps she understood in the way that only a mother can understand that no bond, no matter how strong, can completely erase a creature's true nature. Then one night, while Copa was standing on his familiar rock, a resonant roar came from a much closer distance than usual, and this time, Copa responded from deep within his chest. The sound echoed across the grassland, startling sleeping impalas and drawing the distant lion pride's attention. Neela froze on her tree branch at that moment. She realized that the day she had known would come had finally come for her son because that was how she saw Copa. Eventually, his true nature would demand expression, but instead of fear or jealousy, Neela felt a strange peace because she understood that true love isn't possession but rather letting the person you love become who they truly are. The following morning, when the first light touched the canopy of the sycamore trees, Neela woke Copa with a gentle lick on his face, as she had done hundreds of times before, but this time, instead of leading him hunting as usual, she climbed down the tree and signaled for him to follow. They walked for many hours farther than. Copa was curious but trusting, and they followed all the way to Neela. Eventually, when the sun was high, they came to a place with tall golden grass and big rocks sticking out of the ground. There were about 12 lions in the group, including 4 adult females, 5 cubs of different ages, and 3 young males who might have been only a little older than Copa. This was a new pride that had moved to the area in recent months, and Copa stopped at a safe distance, hiding in the shade of a bush. Copa looked from Neela to the pride of lions, and back again, confused and uncertain. He growled softly. Copa stood hesitatingly pulled between 2 worlds. Before him was his genetic heritage, a life his instincts craved. Behind him was the mother who had saved and raised him, who had taught him not only how to hunt and survive but also love that transcends all barriers in a moment that seemed to last forever. A familiar sound he and Neela had used to communicate, as if asking if this was really what she wanted. Then, with a gentle gesture of maternal love, Neela touched her nose to Copa's cheek, and then she gestured toward the lion pride. He paused and turned to face Neela one last time before continuing on his gait, majestic and confident toward his destiny. At first, the group was tired, but gradually, curiosity overcame caution as an older female lion cautiously stepped forward, sniffing Copa. Perhaps she recognized something familiar in his scent, not the pride's scent, but still the smell of her own kind. Gradually, Copa was accepted into the group, and a young male lion approached. After a tense moment, they started playing together, the customary bonding activity of young lions. As the sun began to set, Neela finally turned away. Her body was heavy with sadness, but her heart lightened with. When the dry season was at its height and the savannah had turned brilliantly yellow, 3 months later, Neela was resting on her familiar sycamore branch. She had continued her life hunting, protecting her territory, and surviving, but observers would notice that her eyes frequently turned toward the horizon where she had let her son go. This could have been the end of the story, a memorable tale of maternal love transcending species boundaries. But one day, as the evening sun was slowly setting, a figure appeared at the edge of her vision. Neela tensed, ready for danger, but as the powerful creature approached the sycamore tree with confident steps and a clear purpose, she realized it was Copa, who was now bigger and stronger. His mane was fully developed around his face, and he approached the tree's base, looking up for Neela. When he saw her, he made a sound that only she could understand, a soft growl, and Neela climbed down the tree and faced her son. They touched noses, an intimate gesture they had shared hundreds of times before, and the line between species was once again broken. Copa didn't stay long. He had his pride, now had responsibilities and a new life, but from that day on he regularly returned to visit Neela, sometimes for a brief stay and other times for hours spent lying together in the shade of the sycamore tree. Regardless of how time went by or how their surroundings changed, the bond between the mother and son leopard and lion, two animals who discovered each other in the midst of their greatest suffering, remained as strong as it had been on the first day because, in this harsh and unforgiving natural world, true love can sometimes transcend all obstacles, even those put up by millions of people.